You may think that architecture is only about buildings. You may think that architects are only focusing on building iconic stuff or maybe their ego. And there are much more misconceptions about architecture and architects. But for today, I don't want to talk about buildings and construction. I want to talk about a different approach to architecture and see architecture as a way of thinking, as a way of analyzing systems and seeing systems, and also design and create new systems. It took me quite some time to get to this point and also to get to this red carpet here, and I studied management before I turned over to architecture. So after I finished my business administration studies, I went over to architecture, and then I was ready for my first job to come. So I was looking for some interesting thing, like an airport maybe, a high-rise, a museum, whatever you think an architect would do. And then I was applying for my first job, and I got assigned for my first job, and I was head of design, should be head of planning, and also head of construction, which is normally wow, but the job was painting walls. So that was my first job in an architectural office. It was a really tiny thing, and then I got soon after to an interesting project focusing on a family house here in Munich. And in this project, I learned about how we live and how you plan a house or how you design a living for a family. After that, in this small scale, I worked on a project about how we work, an office project to bring people together and work together. And step by step, I made my way through to a larger project, which was then about how to innovate, how you get people in a big company together to create better ideas and to improve themselves and invent something which they can take to market. And my largest project so far in China was a production plant, and the question in this project was how we produce and how we build. So you see, after painting walls, I get step by step, I grew with my projects. And in the first project, there were only a few people to deal with. You had the client, you had the consultant, you as architect was dealing with that. But with a larger project, it suddenly explodes, and you have a lot of people to integrate. You have not only the client, you have also the client's representatives. You have other stakeholders being involved. And then you're not anymore just focusing on a design, but also managing a complete different system and also creating some complete different from only a building. And with this experience over my projects, I got two insights. And the first insight I got is that designing a building is like starting up a company. With the complexities you have, and also with the things you're dealing with, and also the people you're dealing with, you have to arrange so many different topics and think in different scales that it's the same thing as setting up an idea for a startup or creating a company. And more interestingly, the second insight, designing a building is like creating new ways to live, work, innovate, and build, also on a systemic level or on a systems level. So these questions and also these projects I had are all around the questions we have today, as we are living in a transformation of how we live, how we innovate, work, move, and build. So then I also discovered that aside from these changes and transformations, also the fields of management, behavior, design, data are somehow blurring in boundaries. They are approaching each other, and architecture as well. And in my case, I see that architecture gets at an intersection point where all these disciplines somehow meet or learn from each other. And this is a momentum of chance for architects or architecture to move forward and to redefine their profession as a way of looking things in a new way and design new systems for our built environment and also about our society. And you will see later in some examples what I mean with how you apply data into architecture and how the profession already started to change. So the next scale for me, what would it be? After I've done the little projects, after I did the bigger projects, could I do some more projects, maybe direct a bigger planning group and stuff like that. But I was questioning myself, what would be the next step to do? And then I decided to go back to zero. And back to zero means that I decided to go back to university to investigate that further. If there's something the profession needs to be updated or maybe needs to be changed in the education, and also to teach the insights I got from all the works I have done and the experience I had. So I went back to zero, integrating also my management education in business administration, skills I learned during my studies and also which I applied in my works. So here again you see my management side of view and also what I learned in this field. And if you get a bigger look on that, if you closely look what the management education was looking like, then it was for the past 50, 70 years focusing on doing decisions and choosing among existing alternatives. The world was somehow characterized by processes and efficiencies. And in this problem-solving attitude, it was more about to decide than to think about new alternatives. On the other side, if you go to the creative industries, for designers and also architects, you see that they have an alternative way of thinking. They think differently on some problems, and they have somehow a problem seeking. And with this, I don't mean that architects are making up problems. They do somehow, of course, but I mean that they're looking behind the obvious. I mean they're looking behind the obvious problem and try to find what really could make a change. And this I call, or also is called problem seeking, and with a design attitude. So you have on the one side so-called matrix thinking of management education. You have on the other side the alternative thinking of design and architecture education. And then ask yourself, our world today, where does it fit better in? In a matrix-like thinking or more in an alternative free way of thinking? And by the time of millennium, management education started to look at creative industries to see how they tackle problems or complex problems. And they also looked at architects, how they approach things, because they realized with this linear thinking, they wouldn't come to an end, or they couldn't work with the complexities and the interrelations we have. So they focused then to learn from the design attitude and also to have a deeper look at architects. And if you look at architects, they don't only have an alternative way of thinking. They have a strong visual processing. I mean, they take a pen, they draw with a pen, and they communicate visually. They also think with a drawing and communicate with a drawing. And this is something completely different as looking at a data sheet or something like that. They can also build up models of that to reframe complexities. And the other thing is that they also have a deep understanding of systems, of the interrelations of the networks which are needed or need to be designed, as you saw in my projects when I was focusing on a housing building or an innovation space. And this deep understanding could also be called as empathy. And these three skills are somehow directed to the building industry and only to buildings. Management education already saw that there are some interesting approaches which can be applied to other problems. So the question would be then, why don't we turn these skills and redirect this design attitude towards the decision attitude of management and then create something new? In management terms, you would say that's innovation if it's applied. So what could happen if the skills are not only directed to buildings, but to open up to some more fields to do that? And this is the question which got me back to university and also which got me back to set up some further steps. And these further steps is getting away from this personal level of having the manager on the one side and having the architect on the other side. Is on an institutional level, you have industries on the one side, and then you have institutions like the university on the other side. So how can we open that up and make that awareness for architecture that they have skills which could be applied in different fields? So management, creative industries, as I said, you have them on the one side, and then you have the architecture research. And at the Technical University of Munich, we started to open that up, this architecture research, and also to try a connection to applied research with industries together, and developing an architecture research incubator, a sort of a platform where students, researchers could work together with industries on fields of building design, but also on fields beyond. And this is what it makes interesting to learn from each other and also to enter a cooperative state. We went on with this project, and the projects we had, or the research studies we had, are applicable to different scales. And as we are here in Munich, we can look at the city scale. I mean, Munich is a very attractive city, and each year about 20,000 people are moving to Munich, and you know that this is a high task for housing and apartments and to provide sufficient space for living. So an architect could easily think, we do a house or we design a house, but an architect, in this case, could also think about an urban strategy to develop or to discover where are the fields and the areas to get more housing developed. And developing housing on a city scale is a tremendous thing with stakeholders being involved. You have authorities, you have planners, you have the neighbors, you have yourself as well if you want to invest in a house. So there are so many regulations and complexities in that you need to have better decisions. And two of my colleagues, Michael and Niels, both architects, they thought, okay, how can we make these complexities aware? How can we integrate that in a platform where we can adjust the parameters for urban authorities or developers to visualize where they can extend housing or where they can set up another floor? And this they called Urban Strategy Playground, directly also putting out the areas gained or then also the regulation which need to be changed. You see that in red, and then with an option to press a button and then to rapid prototype it and to have it then as a model for discussion. And the both didn't study informatics, but they're close to architectural informatics and also to the computer programs. So they said, okay, let's figure that out, and they came up with that project. If we go on a regional scale and the question about how we move, then you could say an architect could make a garage, could make a nicely designed charging station, but he could also think about seeing our movements as a system. And one of my students, Andy, was thinking about mobility systems and also how we affect others by choosing some different kind of transportation or mode of transportation. So he saw we have an impact not only by choosing for ourselves a mode of transportation, but also influencing the decisions of others. And so he went further to investigate that and to apply his skills as architect to a field which is normally not in his domain. And as he learned several CAD programs, he said, okay, let's learn another program and investigate that further. But we are not only in a city or regional, we also have to think globally. And also to think about the skills we have here in our developed countries and to see how do we grow. And this is one interesting project from 3 other students decided to think further, to apply their skills and their thinking to something which is not in our surrounding here as we have achieved so much, but to look at deprived areas and to see what they can do on that. And this interesting thing is that only one of these 3 students is an architect. The other one is a civil engineer, the other one is a climate designer. But they said, okay, we're going to bring that together and to approach a design for a deprived area in Latin America. So they said, we want to go across discipline, we want to go across boundaries and social systems, and also get this architectural way of thinking, not only from the profession of architects, but also that we are getting this architectural thinking inside. And so they went to develop that, and this is something where they also tackling something with a new approach and not providing a solution, but applying their skills first. So in the end, what is the point I want to talk about? It is tough to be an architect, but it is tough also to start painting walls. But I want to activate architects because the skills architects have, they are so sought after and they're becoming even more important. So it's really great if we could apply these skills to a collaborative field and also to work together with other disciplines to achieve better solutions for our challenges to come. And this is, for me, the architects to enter the age of disruption.